And we're back to close out the show. It's the pop culture. It's the PCC multiverse. If you need a listing of where we're at, because we're being played all around the world on great radio stations worldwide, including our latest radio stations, Star Hit 1 FM. Also, as well, we return to Croc Radio as of the new year. And also, I want to give a big shout out to our friends at Cuyahoga Valley Radio Network. That's Cuyahoga Valley Radio Network. I finally got it right, and I'm so proud of myself for allowing us onto their station as well. If you need a listing of all of our great radio stations from all around the world, and also as well many of our over 30 different podcast options, you can check it out today at Pop Culture Cosmos and Game Source on Facebook. My friend, I know you've got a great thing going on with Congratulations You Suck and also your podcast Topicocalypse. So give me an update on what's going on with everything in your world when it concerns Topicocalypse, and Congratulations You Suck.
So Congratulations You Suck, now available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Powell's Books. And as for Topicocalypse, we are posting new episodes. So we just did our, sorry, this wind's down here and making me sneeze. Okay, yeah, Topicocalypse, we just did an episode with a little joint venture of the Pop Culture Cosmos. You know, all the dudes together again, and that's now available on our last episode of PCC, right?
Well, only a portion of it, because most of it is still on your broadcast. So if you want to hear, and that was one of our most popular podcasts that have been played in a while, Josh. So if everybody gets a chance and they want to hear the whole entire thing with the Topicocalypse group, because it's a lot more there that they can go ahead and listen to, they just need to go ahead and check it out on the Topicocalypse channel on Podbean and many other great podcast outlets. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, the episode will be up after Christmas. Right now, I'm working on getting our Albums of the Year episode up, and then we'll jump on to Shows of the Year. And next, we're going to be recording our Video Games of the Year, so stay tuned.
Well, there you go, my friend. And then, of course, Congratulations You Suck. As a last-minute Christmas gift, like we were talking about with Michelle Levis's book ideas, you can also go ahead and get that on the Kindle, the Nook, or really get it very quick through Amazon.com, also Goodreads.com, and also BarnesandNoble.com as well. Well, my friend, it's that time. After 2 years of speculation of what's going on with the Star Wars universe, it's finally come down to this. Your thoughts on Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, the end of the Skywalker saga after 9 films, directly 2 side films, all the side stories and series and all the comic books and novels and all the other stuff that's gone into it, all these years, the decades that have gone into it, it all comes down to this. So I leave the floor to you, my friend, your review of Star Wars Rise of Skywalker.
We're sticking to no spoilers, right, for this?
Yeah, for this one, I am going to do a spoiler cast on the weekend with Jay Bartlett, and I'm inviting you. So just want to let you know it'll be Saturday at around 2 in the afternoon, just to let you know.
All right. Yeah, sounds good. All right. So it's still fresh in my mind, Cam. I'm still digesting it. I'm trying to figure out where to start. Okay, let me just start with my opinion on the movie, okay? The movie is entertaining. It has a lot of callbacks to old Star Wars films, a lot of fan service in there. It kind of cancels out, or they don't really talk about a lot of the events that happened in The Last Jedi. And you can see there's some discrepancies between, The Last Jedi and this film. So you know how the Force Awakens happened, and then The Last Jedi pretty much picks up right after The Force Awakens. In this one, they skip. We don't even know how far ahead of time, right? And you're starting at this part with Kylo Ren, right? And he's heading towards the place where you hear the diabolical voice in the trailer. So it starts with that, and then it jumps around to what Rey's been up to. She's honing her Jedi skills, and then it shows what Poe Dameron and Finn, they got the whole like Lethal Weapon buddy cop thing going on. They're still chilling with Chewbacca, and so you kind of this is where I kind of had an issue with the film, is that it's cool to see that everyone's been up to different things over the course of the film, or in between this film and the last film, but there's also, it feels like the movie is all motion. You know how like have you ever like those movies, right, where it's all just action sequences one after another? Like it feels like, hold on, sorry, there's a siren in the background here. Okay, so this Star Wars film feels like,
I was just gonna say maybe they're chasing after someone who had a heart attack after the ending of
this. Okay, it's, let me be honest, like it's hard to talk about this movie without spoiling things, so I'm trying my best here.
Well, I mean, you said there's a lot of fan service involved.
Yeah, a lot of fan service. A lot of the things where you're like, you watch Star Wars and the last episode, and you're like, oh, it'd be cool if this and this happened. Rian Johnson's like, nope, not gonna let that happen.
And you also spoke about retconning, a lot of stuff that was retconned in The Last Jedi. So I ask you, my friend, was it a good move to retcon the retcon? Because I know you had such a dissatisfaction with The Last Jedi.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so here's where I stand on it. It feels, and I don't know if this is a product of J.J. Abrams taking over this film after The Last Jedi, but it feels like it's, the story from the continuity feels so off between this and the last movie that it almost, it makes me wonder, like, if JJ had control over the whole trilogy, would it be different? I'm not going to go back to a gripe session with The Last Jedi, but it's just, there's so much, the whole movie is just motion, and there's not really a lot of coherent storyline until like the very end. So it's kind of like, again, is the movie entertaining? Yes. Did I enjoy it? I enjoyed a lot of parts of it. Did it wash the taste of The Last Jedi out of my mouth? Yeah, it kind of did. Is it good? It's I would give it like a 6, 6 or 6.5 out of 10. We get to see, we get closure on a lot of things. We get closure. We see there's Force Ghosts, and there's you get more lore on like the Sith side. And then there's more, you get your closure with the whole Kylo Ren and Rey situation. Like they put a bow around a trilogy of films that didn't need to happen. So yes, they clean it up nicely, but again, like it really feels like this whole trilogy did not need to happen, if that makes sense.
I want to ask you, when it comes to Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren. I mean, they alluded to very, very briefly in previous films, and they were supposed to be a little bit more of a factor here. Were they?
Yeah, they were. I mean, they're kind of underutilized. Yeah, they hyped them up like they're this huge deal, and they got a lot of screen time. But what I always loved about Star Wars is the battle sequences, right? You have your the Jedi, the parts where the lightsaber fights, or just the fights in general. There wasn't, they built the Knights of Ren up like they were going to have a huge part in a huge fight in the end, like the penultimate fight, and it never materialized, right? Like
would you equate it to like the Black Order in Marvel, in the MCU, where they were hyped up to be this big thing, and they really just didn't. They were just kind of a little bit of side characters and nothing
right
anymore.
Right, you don't really get any backstory on them. You just they carry around cleavers and spears and things like that, but they get a fight scene, but it lasts less than a minute. So it makes me wonder, like, what was the purpose of that? It's probably because like there's no, there's not a lot of again, it's hard for me to talk about this movie without spoiling it, but there's not a lot of villains, I guess, for them to fight. There's like the rebellion is fighting against the First Order becomes what's called the Final Order, and so there's a lot of like air battles, and there's a couple like ground combat scenes, but outside of that there's only really one major villain, and it's not really an exciting climax to see unfold. It's more like lore oriented as opposed to action oriented.
But you don't mind the direction that it went as far as the movie is concerned, away from the events of The Last Jedi. I mean, that's something you prefer to happen as opposed to trying to be consistently consistent with what The Last Jedi was representing. You like the way it veered into a different direction than The Last Jedi.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, but I mean, like I said, the movie is all motion. It's a lot of things happening without explanation. And you can see where they wrote Leia's character into be more of a prominent role, try to give her proper send off, and like it really is frustrating until you find out where they're going with it, and then you're like, oh, okay, well that kind of makes a little more sense. But yeah, the film takes itself a little more seriously than The Last Jedi did, but again, there's not really a cohesive narrative in this story. It's all just like leading towards the end game, and you get a lot of things that just happen without explanation. So it's like, oh, that happened. Well, why? I don't know, but we're moving on. Like, it's that kind of, it jumps a lot, and it's really just like you get everything you want out of the characters. It feels like it's a Star Wars film with the fan service of a Fast and the Furious movie. You know how like when you watch Fast and the Furious, like it'd be super rad if that car flew into the air, exploded, and Vin Diesel did 6 backflips and landed on the hood of somebody else's car. That's what happens in Star Wars, minus Vin Diesel.
Kind of like 6 Underground. So you're saying so what you're telling me is that in a strange way that The Rise of Skywalker is the Star Wars version of 6 Underground.
In the I guess like in the idea that it gives you a lot of things that you think would be cool, but once you see it materialize, you're like, okay, well maybe I didn't really want that as badly as I thought I did.
So the imagery and everything else, the effects and everything that surrounds it, the impending battle that appears to be on the horizon for those who haven't seen it yet. But if you've seen the trailers, you see that there's obviously going to be some type of momentous battle that takes place in the movie at some point in time. Was that something that was satisfying from that end? That's non-Rey Kylo Ren oriented. I mean, like, similar to what we saw with the Return of the Jedi, where you had the main protagonists fighting each other, then you had the space battle going on outside the Death Star, and then you had the battle on the planet. Is there something similarly structured here within the confines of Rise of Skywalker?
It's funny. I didn't actually think about that till you asked that question. There is a big space battle, right? Like between the fleet of Star Destroyers we see in the trailer and the Rebel Resistance, whatever they're called in this trilogy of films. There is a big battle there, but it's not as big as you'd think, right? You have all these ships showing up, and it doesn't happen the way you think. Like you see Lando Calrissian in the trailer. He doesn't fly the Millennium Falcon that long. They don't really show him doing much except doing a couple little like sweeps across the screen. He doesn't really get into combat a lot. You see Poe Dameron, like he's mostly like leading people, so you don't really get to see him do his cool little X-Wing maneuvers like he did in The Force Awakens. The battle scene is not what you expect. It doesn't last as long as you expect because they tie it into what happens with the main antagonist of the film. He affects what happens in the battle, and that in turn affects how Rey finishes the movie. Again, though, it is really hard for me to talk about this without spoiling things. Like everything I can possibly say about this movie is a spoiler because it is wrapping up every single plot line that has been unfolded over the course of the past 2 films.
I'll leave you with this, my friend, because we don't have much time left to record for this session, for this episode of the PCC Multiverse. But I ask you this. Like you said, was it overall a positive experience enough to recommend for people to go see it? And do you think that it will and do you think now that you've seen it, it will have you wanting more, maybe 3-4 years down the line when another Star Wars universe is created and shown on the screen once again?
Okay, so this is what I'm going to say. It was a satisfying film, but it was a film that didn't need to happen. This whole trilogy didn't really need to happen. You get all your twists and turns, and they wrap it up nicely, and it has satisfying conclusions. But this film moves so fast, you don't get a lot of character development, don't get a lot of plot development. They pick a path and they just careen down that path until the movie's over. And again, like it comes to a satisfying conclusion, but it's not. It feels like this whole trilogy of films is unnecessary, and that's not just based on this film; it's based on the other films as well. It feels like this didn't really need to happen. And then, but yes, am I making sense? Like, it's a satisfying movie, and I would say go watch it for sure. But at the end of it all, I don't feel like this whole new trilogy of films needed to happen.
Well, something like we discussed before at the beginning of the show, that we had a series which in the 70s and 80s was really good. Then you had the prequels, which were not so good by most people's standards. And then you had this series of films, which for the most part, outside of critical acclaim for The Last Jedi, because even though it was critically acclaimed, people were, like you said before, very polarizing to a lot of individuals out there.
Right.
And for the most part, for me, I will say that the experience of this series of films, in fact, the entire ones, including Solo and Rogue One, were just okay. So, I can see why you say that they didn't need to happen, because nothing really blew it out of the water for you of any of these movies since 2015.
Yeah, and it's just from a story point of view, though, it didn't. The First Order felt like a minor threat. They tried to like pool it all together with the antagonists that you'll see in this film, but it still doesn't feel like the stakes were all there, because there's a lot of things that don't make sense. And you have, for example, this isn't really a spoiler, but because we saw in the trailer, Rey goes and explores the Death Star, right? The remnants of the Death Star. And so she's in there, and the ship is in shambles, right? And she goes into this room, and for some reason there's power still in this room. And they don't really like show when the Death Star came down, you'd assume that there would be a bunch of like dead stormtroopers in there. They don't really, everything's just empty. And there's like panels still, kind of active in the different places that she tries to go. There's just a lot of like continuity things that don't really make sense, but it's a satisfying movie. I would recommend watching it. It's entertaining. It's a good, it's 2.5 hours, but you don't really, it moves so fast. It's visually pleasing. It's fun to watch. Go watch it. But again, it just feels like it's the bow on something that didn't need to happen. Would I go back to Star Wars?
Yeah, in yes, 2 or 3 years, because you were really dead set against it as of The Last Jedi when you watched it, but 2 years later, you were somewhat accepting of going back into it and actually kind of excited for it.
Yeah, and I don't regret watching it.
Could you get that excitement again, maybe in 3 years for another Star Wars saga that starts?
If it was outside the Skywalkers, like it would have to, like we discussed earlier, it would have to be like 100 years after all this stuff happened. Like the dust needs to settle from all of this stuff, and it needs to not revolve around, empires or anything like that. It needs to be like there needs to be some like truly new diabolical force. It needs to not be about revenge. It needs to have something that like a threat, how Mass Effect has the Reapers. Like there has to be something there that is truly threatening the galaxy. And that would get me back into a Star Wars film, but it would have to be an original idea, not based on what's already been done.
Well, fair enough, my friend. That's a great review right there for you from Josh Pederson for Star Wars Rise of the Skywalker. Non-spoilery, kind of, in the best way he could. If you have any questions for him or for all of us, because we're going to go ahead on this weekend, also have a spoiler cast on Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, and go ahead and record it this weekend on our YouTube channel. So if you have any questions for us, or if you have any questions you want to ask for that spoiler cast, or just our regular shows in general, go ahead and let us know. popculturecosmos@yahoo.com. And you can also tell us if you like the film as well. Well, Josh, I cannot thank you enough for going ahead and being on today's show. Plus also give a shout out to our fellow National University graduate and fellow National University alum, Michelle Levis, for being on the show as well. Any last thoughts on the way out?
Yeah, go see Star Wars. Go see Star Wars. Bring an end to this whole trilogy and let us know what you think. Because I would really be curious to see what audience perception is outside the Rotten Tomatoes and the film snobs out there. So go see it, send us an email, and let me know what you think.
Or you can also send us, or you can let us know on Twitter at Pop Culture Cosmo as well. Well, it's always been a great time talking to you, my friend. And on Monday, we're also going to have more on Star Wars Rise of Skywalker and so much more in the coming days. Plus, more lists of the decade as well, with many great guests coming along the way just before we get to the end of the decade ourselves. So for Josh Pederson, this is Gerald Glassford. It's another beautiful day in paradise right here in the PCC multiverse. We thank you for listening, and thank you for watching as well. And here's hoping you have yourself a great day.